In the heart of Enugu, surrounded by hills that looked like sleeping giants, lived a young woman named Adanma. Her name alone made people smile. It meant a daughter of beauty, and truly, she was the kind of woman that drew attention without trying. Her laughter could soften even the hardest faces, and her presence carried a calm that silenced noise wherever she went. Adanma was born into a home of plenty. Her father, Chief Izudo, was one of the wealthiest men in the East. Their compound had more cars than most streets, and servants moved about like shadows, swift, quiet, and obedient. Her mother, Madame Oluchi, loved to say that God had favored them beyond measure. Adanma never lacked anything. From designer clothes that arrived from Lagos every week to perfumes that filled her room with sweetness, her life shimmered like a dream many prayed for. Yet, for all the luxury around her, there was something missing, a quiet emptiness that no gift could fill. She would often sit by the large window of her room, staring at the village road below. Children played barefoot, laughing freely as dust rose behind them, and she'd wonder how something so ordinary could look so precious. Her father wanted her to marry Chibweek, a young man whose family owned estates in Abuja. He was handsome, educated, and carried himself like a prince. But whenever he visited, Adanma felt nothing. His words sounded rehearsed, his smiles too practiced. Her heart didn't move. It was as if her soul was waiting for someone or something that money could never buy. One afternoon, the sky was bright and clear. Adanma decided to step out without her usual escort. She wore a simple wrapper and tied her hair in a scarf, wanting to feel ordinary for once. She walked past the gates and down the narrow path leading to the marketplace. The air smelled of roasted corn and ripe mangoes. Traders called out to buyers, and laughter bounced from one stall to another. Adanma blended in quietly, moving from one spot to another, enjoying the sounds, the smells, the color of life she'd always watched from afar. Then she noticed a young man repairing shoes under a small shade made from palm leaves. His name, written in chalk on a wooden board, was Obinna. He looked up briefly, his eyes meeting hers with a calm honesty that made her pause. There was nothing polished about him. No gold wristwatch, no fancy clothes, but his smile was warm, unforced, and real. She stood there longer than she planned. He greeted her respectfully and went back to work, hammering nails into a torn sandal. Something about his focus intrigued her. She had seen men chase wealth with desperation, but Obinna seemed content with his small world. Adanma left without saying much, but her heart stayed behind with that quiet cobbler whose eyes had seen straight through her disguise. That night, she couldn't sleep. The thought of him filled her mind like a song she couldn't stop humming. Days turned into weeks, and she found excuses to visit the market more often. Sometimes she'd buy fruits she didn't need, just to pass by his corner. They began to talk, simple conversations at first. He told her about his late father, how he'd learned shoemaking to care for his mother and younger sister. There was no bitterness in his voice, only strength. Adanma admired that. She realized that he was rich in ways her world could never measure. His heart held peace, his eyes carried truth. He didn't see her as a chief's daughter, he saw her as a person. But love, especially the kind that crosses the lines of class and status, never hides for long. One of her father's guards spotted her at the market talking to Obinna. Within hours, the news reached Chief Izudo. He summoned her immediately. When she walked into his study, his face was thunder. "Adanma," he said, his voice low but shaking with anger. "What is this I'm hearing? You, my only daughter, speaking with a common shoemaker. Have you lost your senses?" She tried to explain, but he cut her off. "Do you know who you are? You are not like them. You will not disgrace this family. You are engaged to Chibweek, and that is final." Tears filled her eyes, but she said nothing. She knew her father's word was law. That night, she lay awake listening to the distant drums from the village square, each beat echoing the pain in her chest. Days passed. She stayed indoors, pretending to be fine, but her spirit was restless. Her heart yearned for the simplicity she had tasted in those moments at the market. One evening, As the sun softened over the red earth, she made a decision. She wrote a short note to her mother and quietly left the compound, wrapping her head with a scarf. She walked back to the market, her steps fast but steady. When she reached Obina's shade, he was packing up for the day. He looked surprised to see her, then concerned when he noticed her trembling hands. "Adanma, what's wrong?" he asked gently. "I can't explain everything now," she said, her voice shaking. "But I know one thing, I'm tired of living in a golden cage. You once said peace doesn't live in big houses. I want to see if you were right." He stared at her, unsure what to say. Before he could respond, a loud voice called her name. She turned to see two of her father's guards approaching fast. Obina's eyes widened. "Go," he whispered. "They'll take you back." But she didn't move. For the first time in her life, she stood still, refusing to run from her truth. The guards reached her, and one of them grabbed her arm. She turned to Obina with tears in her eyes. "Don't forget me," she said softly. As they led her away, Obina stood frozen, watching her disappear down the path. The evening wind carried the faint scent of her perfume, leaving him with the weight of what could never be. That night, the market felt emptier than ever. And though life went on, something in both their hearts had shifted forever. The next morning came with quiet tension inside Chief Izudo's compound. The household staff moved around carefully, afraid to make noise. Everyone could feel that something had changed since Adanma's secret trip to the market. Her father had not spoken a word to her since she was brought back, but the air around him felt heavy, like thunder before a storm. Adanma sat by her window again, staring at the trees beyond the compound walls. She felt trapped. Everything she had once admired, the marble floors, the tall gate, the scent of new cars, now felt strange, almost cold. Her mother, Madame Oluchi, came into her room quietly carrying a tray of breakfast. She set it down and looked at her daughter with eyes full of worry. "My daughter," she began softly, "you know your father's temper. Please don't provoke him again. Whatever it is that draws you to that shoemaker, end it now. You have everything you need here." Adanma didn't look away from the window. "Mama," she said, her voice low, "I have everything, yes, but I don't have peace. What's the point of gold if my heart feels empty?" Her mother sighed deeply and touched her shoulder. "You speak like someone who doesn't understand the world. Love doesn't feed you, my child. It doesn't build houses or buy comfort. It fades, and when it fades, you'll need the things you now reject." Adanma turned to her mother, tears glistening in her eyes. "Maybe so, Mama. But I'd rather eat Gary with peace than feast on sorrow." Her mother didn't reply. She knew the girl had made up her mind, and no argument could reach her heart now. Later that day, Chief Izudo called a family meeting. He sat in the living room, dressed in his usual flowing white outfit, his walking stick resting across his knees. When Adanma entered, his eyes met hers with an icy calm. "I have made my decision," he said. "The engagement with Chibweek's family will take place in 3 weeks. I will not have my name dragged through the mud because of childish feelings. Do you understand?" She opened her mouth to speak, but he raised his hand sharply. "No words. This is not up for discussion." Her heart felt heavy, but she held her head high and walked away. Her father watched her leave, unsure whether he was winning or losing a battle he didn't understand. Days rolled by, and preparations for the engagement began. Tailors arrived, decorators came and went, and musicians were booked. The compound buzzed with activity, but Adanma felt detached from it all. Her face wore a practiced smile, but her heart wandered back to the market, to the man with kind eyes and rough hands who had taught her what peace felt like. One morning, when her mother and father were out visiting relatives, Adanma slipped away again. This time, she didn't go to the market. She followed a small path that led to the edge of the village, where a stream ran clear and quiet. And there, sitting under a small shade, was Obina. He looked up as soon as he saw her, his expression caught between surprise and disbelief. "Adanma, you came." She nodded and sat beside him. The air was warm and still. Birds called in the distance. For a moment, they said nothing. Then she broke the silence. "They fixed my engagement date," she said softly. Obinna's jaw tightened. "So it's true, then?" "Yes," she replied. "But my heart is not part of it. It belongs somewhere else." He looked at her, eyes filled with emotion he could no longer hide. "You don't belong to my world, Adanma. Your father is right. I have nothing to give you." She shook her head. "You gave me what no one else did. Peace. Truth. You made me see life differently. That's not nothing." Obinna sighed. "Peace doesn't fill an empty stomach." "Maybe," she said, "but neither does sadness." He smiled faintly, and for a moment, the heaviness lifted. They talked until the sun rose higher, until the shadows around them began to shift. Before she left, she pulled something from her wrist, a thin gold bracelet. She pressed it into his hand. "Keep this," she said. "Not because of its price, but because it carries a piece of me." He wanted to refuse, but she closed his hand around it and walked away before he could speak. That night, a storm gathered. Rain beat hard against the roof, and thunder rolled like a warning. Chief Izudo sat alone in his study, thinking about his daughter. He had built his life on control, on structure, on doing things the right way. But now, his own child had become a mystery to him. He loved her deeply, but pride wrapped that love in chains. When the engagement day came, guests filled the compound. The smell of jollof rice drifted through the air, drums echoed, and laughter bounced from wall to wall. Everyone was dressed in their finest. Chibweek arrived in a white agbada, confident and proud, surrounded by friends. But Adanma wasn't smiling. She moved like a shadow, her thoughts far away. Each step she took felt heavier than the last. When the time came for her to be presented to her husband-to-be, she hesitated. The hall went silent. Chief Izudo frowned, his jaw tightening. "Adanma, what's wrong?" She looked around, at her father's stern face, at her mother's worried eyes, at the strangers clapping politely. Then she spoke clearly, her voice shaking but strong. "I can't do this," she said. "I can't marry someone I don't love." A loud murmur rippled through the crowd. Her father's face turned red with anger. "What nonsense is this? Have you lost your mind?" Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she didn't look away. "You taught me to be honest, Papa. To never live a lie. I can't stand here and pretend." The room erupted in confusion. Some guests tried to calm the chief, others whispered in disbelief. Chibweek stood frozen, humiliation written across his face. Before anyone could stop her, Adanma ran out of the hall. She didn't care about the stares, the gasps, the shouting. She ran through the compound gates, down the path, her wrapper brushing against her legs as the sound of her father's voice faded behind her. She didn't stop until she reached the same small stream where she'd last seen Obinna. He was there again, as if waiting. When he saw her, he stood up, shock written all over his face. "Adanma, what happened?" She was breathing hard, tears and rain mixing on her face. "I left," she said. "I couldn't go through with it. I don't care what happens now." Obinna looked around, unsure if it was real. "They'll come for you." "I know," she said. "But at least I'll be free." He hesitated only for a moment, then took her hand. "Come with me." They ran together down a narrow footpath that led deeper into the forest behind the stream. The ground was wet, the air thick with the smell of rain. They didn't know where they were going, they just knew they couldn't stop. After what felt like hours, they found a small hut made of clay and palm leaves, abandoned long ago. Obinna led her inside. It was empty but dry. She sat down on the floor, exhausted, and he crouched beside her. "You really did it," he said quietly, still trying to believe it. She smiled through her tears. "I really did." Outside, the rain softened. Inside, silence filled the small space, but it wasn't empty. It was peaceful, the kind of peace Adanma had been chasing all her life. For the first time, she wasn't surrounded by wealth or guarded by servants. She was just herself, with the one person who had seen her for who she truly was. But the world outside wasn't going to let them rest for long. Back at the Izudo compound, chaos had erupted. Chief Izudo had sent men to search every corner of the village. Chibweek's family had stormed out in anger, calling off the engagement and vowing never to return. Madame Oluchi was in tears, torn between love for her daughter and fear for what her husband might do next. As the search parties spread through the night, the hills echoed with voices calling Adanma's name. And somewhere deep within those hills, Adanma lay awake beside Obinna, her heart beating fast. She had traded her comfort for love, her safety for freedom. Whether it would destroy her or save her, she didn't know. But for the first time, her heart was her own. Dawn crept slowly over the hills of Enugu. Mist hung low above the red earth as roosters called across the quiet fields. In a small abandoned hut hidden behind tall bushes, Adanma opened her eyes to the sound of birds and distant voices. Her head rested on Obinna's arm. For a brief moment, before memory returned, she felt peace, the kind she had once dreamed of. Then everything rushed back. The engagement, her father's fury, her mother's tears, the running, the rain. She sat up quickly, heart pounding. "Do you think they're still looking for me?" she asked. Obinna looked toward the small window slit. "They will not stop today," he said quietly. "Your father is not the kind of man to accept shame, but will stay low until things calm." She nodded, brushing the dust from her wrapper. The hut was small and old. Cracks ran across the walls, and a faint smell of clay hung in the air. But it was shelter, and that was enough for now. He stood, grabbed his small bag, and said, "I'll get some food from the stream side. There's a woman there who sells roasted yam in the mornings. She won't ask questions." Adanma watched him leave, the reality of her choice sinking deeper with every passing hour. She had left everything behind, her home, her clothes, her comfort, her name. Yet, she didn't regret it. For the first time, she felt alive, even in hiding. When Obinna returned, he brought roasted yam wrapped in leaves and a small bottle of water. They ate quietly. Between bites, their eyes met often, saying things their lips didn't dare to voice. After the meal, Obinna looked at her carefully. "Adanma, what do you want to do now? We can't stay here forever. Your father's men will search the forests next." She looked out through the small window where the morning light poured in faintly. "I don't know," she admitted. "I just know I can't go back. If I return, they'll lock me away or force me into that marriage. I can't live that lie." He nodded slowly, understanding. "Then we leave this place. My mother's people live 2 villages away, near Nsukka. It's quiet there. We can go at night, follow the stream until it bends toward the north. No one will expect us to go that far." Adanma smiled faintly. "You've thought about this." "I've thought about you," he said simply. That night, they packed what little they had, a wrapper, a few pieces of yam, a bottle of water, and set out under the cover of darkness. The forest paths were narrow, wet with dew, and filled with the chirping of crickets. Owls hooted in the distance as they moved silently through the thick grass. Hours passed. They crossed streams, climbed small ridges, and followed faint trails used by farmers. By dawn, they reached a small clearing overlooking a valley dotted with farms and mud houses. Obinna pointed toward the far edge. "That's Umuozu," he said. "We'll rest there." They made their way down, reaching the village by mid-morning. The place was calm, farmers working, women fetching water, goats wandering around freely. No one seemed to recognize them. They found an old woman selling akara by the roadside. Obinna greeted her warmly, and she smiled at him. Obinna, is that you?" she asked. "It's been years. I thought you had gone to the city." "I tried, Mama," he replied, smiling. "But life had other plans." The woman's eyes shifted to Adanma, who stood quietly behind him. And this beautiful lady? Obinna hesitated. She's my wife, he said finally. We're just passing through. The woman nodded approvingly. You chose well. She looks humble. Adanma smiled politely, her heart thumping at the word wife. They bought some akara and continued walking until they found a small abandoned hut near the edge of the village. With a bit of cleaning, it became their home. Days turned into weeks. Life settled into a quiet rhythm. Obinna worked repairing shoes for the villagers while Adanma helped fetch water, cooked, and sometimes sold roasted groundnuts at the market. The people accepted her warmly, though they knew little about where she came from. At night, they sat outside their hut, talking softly under the open sky. Sometimes they laughed about small things, sometimes they sat in silence, simply enjoying the peace. It wasn't a grand life, but it was real. Yet deep down, both knew peace built on hiding wouldn't last forever. Back in Enugu, Chief Izudo had fallen ill. The stress of his daughter's disappearance weighed heavily on him. Rumors spread fast. Some said Adanma had run away with a poor man, others claimed she'd been kidnapped. The chief refused to eat, refused to speak much. His pride had cracked, leaving behind a father's grief. One evening, Madame Oluchi went into his room carrying a bowl of soup. She found him sitting by the window, staring into the distance. Izudo, she said gently, you must eat something. He shook his head. Do you hear how people talk about us now? They say I couldn't control my own daughter. They say my name has lost respect. She placed the bowl on the table and sat beside him. Maybe it's not respect you lost, she said softly. Maybe it's your daughter. He turned sharply. Are you blaming me? I'm blaming no one, she said calmly. But maybe this is not about shame or pride. Maybe it's about a child who just wanted to be happy. The chief said nothing. But later that night, when everyone had gone to bed, he sat awake thinking about her words. Meanwhile, in Umuozu, the quiet days continued. Adanma had grown used to the rhythm of simple life. The morning sounds of roosters, the laughter of children, the way the sun painted everything gold, it all brought her a joy she hadn't known before. But one afternoon, everything changed. Obinna had gone to the market to deliver repaired shoes. Adanma stayed behind, cleaning their small hut. As she swept, she heard footsteps outside. When she looked up, 3 men stood at the doorway, her father's guards. Her heart froze. Madam Adanma, one of them said. Your father sent us. Please don't make this hard. She didn't move. For a moment, the world stood still. Then she turned and ran. The guards shouted and chased after her, their heavy boots thudding against the ground. She darted through the narrow paths, her heart racing. Obinna, hearing the commotion from afar, dropped everything and ran toward the sound. He met her just as one of the guards caught up and grabbed her arm. Without thinking, Obinna tackled the man, sending both of them crashing to the ground. Chaos followed. Shouts echoed across the fields. Villagers gathered, unsure what was happening. Adanma clung to Obinna's hand as they tried to escape again, but the guards overpowered them. Enough, one shouted. Your father wants you home, and you will come with us. Adanma struggled, tears streaming down her face. Tell him I'm not his prisoner. Tell him I just want to live. But her words vanished into the noise. They dragged her away as Obinna watched helplessly, his lip bleeding, his shirt torn. He tried to follow, but one guard pushed him down hard. When they returned to Enugu, the entire compound was silent. Chief Izudo waited outside, leaning on his stick. When Adanma stepped out of the car, her face streaked with tears, he didn't shout. He didn't move. He just looked at her for a long time. Is this what you wanted? He asked finally, his voice tired and low. To throw away everything. She met his gaze, her voice trembling. I didn't throw away anything, Papa. I found what I was missing. He looked at her for a long time, then sighed deeply. You are your mother's daughter, he said quietly, turning away. Days passed before anyone spoke of it again. The guards were dismissed, the noise faded, and the chief withdrew into silence. But one evening, as he sat alone on the balcony, he saw Obinna walking through the gate, escorted by one of the servants. The young man bowed respectfully. "Chief, I came not to defy you, but to ask for forgiveness. I love your daughter, but I'll never shame your family again. If it pleases you, I'll leave this town tonight." Chief Izudo looked at him for a long time. There was no arrogance in the boy's face, only sincerity. "You came here knowing I could have you arrested," he said. "I came because I had to tell the truth," Obinna replied. Silence stretched between them. Then the chief asked quietly, "Do you have family?" "Yes, sir," Obinna said. "My mother and sister. They live in Succa." The chief nodded slowly, tapping his stick against the floor. "You are a brave man," he said at last. "Go home to your mother. As for my daughter, I don't know yet what to do with her." Obinna bowed deeply and left. When Adanma heard what he had done, she wept quietly. That night, she went to her father's room. He was sitting alone, as usual. "Papa," she said softly, "he came here not to fight but to make peace. Doesn't that mean something?" Her father looked up. His eyes were tired but not angry. "You think love can erase shame?" "I think love can heal it," she said. He was silent for a long time, then finally spoke. "If he truly loves you, he will come again. And when he does, I'll listen." Weeks passed. The rains returned. One morning, a knock echoed through the compound gates. It was Obinna again, this time, not with fear but with quiet courage. He stood tall, holding a small calabash of palm wine. Chief Izudo came out slowly. Their eyes met, and for the first time, something softened in the chief's face. He motioned for the young man to sit. That day, words turned into understanding, pride turned into forgiveness, and what once felt impossible began to take shape. Months later, Adanma stood in the same courtyard where her engagement had once been announced. This time, there were no decorations, no noise, no strangers. Just her parents, Obinna's mother, and a few elders. The ceremony was simple but filled with warmth. As palm wine was passed around and prayers were said, Chief Izudo looked at his daughter and smiled faintly for the first time in many months. Adanma glanced at Obinna. His hand found hers under the table. No gold, no diamonds, just love. In that quiet moment, she finally understood. What her heart had longed for was never about wealth or status. It was about peace, truth, and belonging. And though her story had begun in a house of riches, it found its ending in the simplest of places, inside the heart of the one thing money could never buy. And that's how Adanma's story reminds us that true wealth isn't found in gold or grand houses, but in the quiet peace of a heart that finally finds home. Sometimes, what we search for isn't far, it's just hidden behind the noise of everything we think we need. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe, share it with someone who loves deep, emotional tales, and tell us in the comments what country you're watching from and what your time says right now. Your support keeps these stories alive. Stay tuned for the next one, because more unforgettable tales are on the way.